right, so we are in week 3 of this Life Church series, True Virtue, and we're talking about 4 virtues that each Christian should possess. Every Jesus follower. These are 4 things, and this is not a all-inclusive list, obviously, but these are 4 main virtues that we should possess. And this week, we're talking to any of those of you who have ever felt like giving up, right? I'm ready to quit. I'm ready to throw in the towel. I'm over it. I'm done. Giving up. You know, it's said that nobody likes a quitter. I've heard that phrase before. Maybe you have. Nobody likes a quitter. You know, and believe it or not, I really think that none of us ever really want to quit. None of us ever really want to give up, want to throw in the towel, but, you know, sometimes it's just, life's hard. Things get difficult, we face adversity, and it's just like, you know, I really don't have any gas left in the tank. I've given all that I can give. I'm over it, I'm tired, I'm done, I give up. Yeah, I think we've all had those moments in our life at some point in time in which we truly contemplate quitting. Like, just, I'm done, I'm over it. Maybe it was a dream that you had at one point, right? A business venture maybe, something that you wanted to do, this thought or idea that you had, and it hasn't happened, and you're at a point in your life where you don't see it happening in the future, and you're just ready to quit. I'm over the dream. It's not going to happen. Maybe it's even a marriage thing, right? And you and your spouse, for some reason, were just not getting along, and retirement was going to bring us together, but now that we're together all the time, we don't want to be together all the time, and it's marriage struggles, or you've thought about quitting there. Maybe it's your kids, right? And they get that teenage attitude, and it's like, I am over this. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to respond. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's something with ministry, something with the church. Maybe it's just life in general, and it's 2022, and inflation is sky high, and I can barely afford to do anything, and my job is terrible, and I don't like my coworkers, and you're just ready to quit. You think I've tried, right? I've given it my best effort. I've prayed. I've believed. I've done all that I can do, but I am on empty, and I can't just go any further. And maybe you're not there right now, but I'm sure you've been there before. Hebrews 10:35, the writer of Hebrews says, "Therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For yet a little while the coming one will come and will not delay." And you know, I rather like this verse, and actually verse 37, where the writer says, "And yet a little while the coming one will come and will not delay." He's actually quoting an Old Testament prophet, Habakkuk. Habakkuk is one of those short books kind of in the back of the Old Testament, and it's actually a really interesting book to read. It's a dialogue between Habakkuk and God, and in that dialogue, Habakkuk is raising some concerns that he has with God. In fact, he's complaining in many ways about Judah and Judah's sinfulness. Judah had turned away from the Old Testament prophets. They were being sinful, and at the same time, the Babylonians were actually invading, and it seemed as though God is using the Babylonians to punish the nation of Judah for their sinfulness. Habakkuk pleads with God in the book, and he's crying out actually because of the righteous, because even though the nation of Judah had turned away, Habakkuk is saying there's still righteous people in the nation. So Habakkuk is pleading with God for the righteous, pleading for God to intercede. And in chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It surely will come. It will not delay. Again, verse 37 of Hebrews 10 says, yet in a little while the coming one will come and will not delay. And this alone should be encouragement to you today. How many of you know that God is rarely early, but he is never late? We have a God who is very rarely early, but is never late. And you know, a lot of times in life, we just feel like we're waiting and waiting and waiting on God. And when is it going to happen, God? And we're praying, and we get to that point where we feel like giving up. So the question is, what do we do when we feel like giving up? Angela Duckworth is a former teacher, psychologist. She studied at Harvard and Oxford. She wrote a book. She's been on several different TED Talks. And she asked the question, why do successful people succeed? Right? She studied and looked for a reason, tried to find a correlation between successful people and why is it that they succeed? What's different about them that these people become successful? Her research took her to West Point Military Academy, where she studied the cadets. And she tried to figure out why is it that some cadets are incredibly successful, they excel in their fields, they get promoted quickly, and others fail. Others just drop out of the program. She went to the Scripps National Spelling Bee and looked at the students who were year after year after year succeeding and advancing, and the students that just seemed to fail. She looked at teachers that were in some of the hardest school districts in the world, and why was it that some of these teachers in these incredibly difficult school districts advanced and they stayed with it and they succeeded, and others quit, left the school district, found other jobs. In her research, she found that success in life, or being a successful person in life, was not linked to your IQ, right? Your intelligence quotient. That is how you perform on standardized tests. You guys understand IQ is just a basic measure of human intellect or human intelligence. She found that IQ played absolutely no role in a person's success. She also found that the most important quality in being successful was not talent. It was not your ability, the things that you were good at, how gifted you might be. Rather, her research found that the most important quality to being a successful person was your adversity quotient, AQ. That is a person's willingness and ability to fight through and to overcome adversity. Maybe you could also call it perseverance. In her book, she calls it grit. Having grit was the most important trait in becoming a successful person. Grit is defined by passion and perseverance for achieving or working towards achieving long-term goals. Stamina, right? Working at something that I want and not taking no for an answer, not giving up. Focusing on the long term, not focusing on right now, but on the future, and what do I have to do to achieve the thing that I want in the future the most. Grit is hard work. And grit is hard work not just day in and day out, but week in and week out, month after month, and year after year, focused on the long term, having that long-term goal, and working to do whatever it is you have to do to make that long-term goal a reality. Living life as a marathon, right? It's not just a sprint, but it's a marathon. I want to share with you this morning a Bible story that I think kind of shows this idea of grit. And And it's a story that you are all familiar with. It's in Joshua 6. And if you remember, the nation of Israel was led out of Egypt. And while they were awaiting the Ten Commandments, they sinned. And because of that sin, they were not able to inherit that land. God said that generation would not inherit the land that was promised to them. So they wandered in the desert for 40 years. Well, that generation is now gone, and Joshua has taken over. And Joshua gets the task of leading the nation of Israel into the promised land. And in Joshua 6, they come to Jericho. And it says in verse 1 that Jericho was shut up inside and out because of the people of Israel. No one went out and no one came in. Right? Jericho understands Israel's here to take this land, so they shut down the gates. Verse 2, it says, the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of this war, going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the ark, and on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make the long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every one straight before it. Right? So the nation of Israel was promised this land. They've been wandering for 40 years, awaiting the time that they can take this land. And at this particular point, they are ready to enter the promised land, but they have a problem. There is an obstacle, and that problem is Jericho. And this problem, Jericho, is not something that IQ or talent or ability is going to help them overcome. Brings me to my first point. And that question as to why is it that some people give up, right? Why is it that sometimes we quit? And the first point is this. Oftentimes, our perspective is very limited. Right? Oftentimes we have a very limited perspective. You see, Jericho itself was not a very large city. In fact, most scholars will tell you that it could be walked in a day or in an hour. So you could walk the entire city in less than an hour. So the city size itself was not a problem for Israel. The problem was the walls. The walls were incredibly tall. They were incredibly thick, deep walls. They were impenetrable, and when the gates were closed and secured, no one was able to get in and get out. I can see how Israel is ready to take the promised land. They are ready to take what was promised to them, but it seems unattainable because the city's locked up. These walls, what are we going to do with these walls? There's no way that we can get through them. Oftentimes we quit because our perspective is limited. Right? There are problems, there's hurdles, there's difficulties. And when they arise, that's all we see. That's where we focus. They see the walls. Right? Maybe your issue is you're trying to get out of debt, right? We've all been there before where we had some amount of debt, and it's like we're going to work, we're going to get out of debt. We're going to Dave Ramsey this, we're going to get a budget, we're going to debt snowball, we're going to pay off our debt and be debt-free. And as soon as you make that plan and put it into action, something breaks. Something in the house, something with the car, and now I got to spend more money to fix and repair that thing, right? We focus on the problem. Maybe it's mending a relationship, right? You feel like I need to mend this relationship. I need to make things better, so we meet. We try to have open and honest conversation, and it turns into arguments, and then name-calling, and then things get worse. Maybe it's getting your family to church on time. Anyone ever been there? It's like we're running late, we're running behind, get dressed, hurry up, we gotta move, and before you know it, in the car on the way to church, you're yelling at each other, and we're driving fast, and it's like we just failed. Jericho was secured. right? Nobody gets in, nobody gets out. Israel is there, ready to take the land, but all they see is this wall. How are we going to do this? Their perspective was limited. But it's interesting to me in verse 2. And if you read this in verse 2, I want you to pay attention to this statement. God says to Joshua, I have given Jericho into your hands. Understand that statement for just a minute here. God is speaking into the future in the past tense. God is speaking into the future in the past tense. It hasn't happened yet, but God has already made it so. God is the only one who can speak past tense about a future truth. God is the only one who can tell you what is before what is has come to be. Our perspective is limited, right? We have a tendency of focusing on what's in front of us, what is right there, right now. Like the Israelites marching around the walls, I can only imagine that they are ready for war, they are ready to fight, they are ready to take the land that God has promised them, and they get to Jericho and it's a wall. What do? We're just out here marching. I'm ready to fight, I'm ready to take this, but there's a wall, and somehow marching around the wall is going to fix this. Right? It wasn't a fun camping trip for them. This was 40 years that they had wandered in the wilderness. 40 years that they had awaited this promised land. You see, I think there's more to it. Right? Because what do we often do? Right? Oftentimes we have this goal. We're working for something and we're working hard at it. And we're trying to have grit. We're trying to have perseverance and focus on the long-term goal. And then we get on the Facebook. Right? We see somebody else and we see something that they have. We see moments of their success and we compare their highlight reel to our behind the scenes and we see what they have and we see what our struggle is, the thing that we deal with, our wall. But what we don't see is the price that they paid. We don't see their personal sacrifices. We don't see the issues they had to work through, their private battles. You see, far too often in life, I think we give up because our perspective is limited. We focus on the problem, on what's in front of us. And the other thing I'd say is we give up because our progress isn't always obvious. Right? We're working at it, we're trying our best, but we don't always see that progress. We don't always feel that step forward. Joshua 6 verse 10 says, But Joshua commanded the people. He said, You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out from your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout. So he caused the ark of the Lord to circle the city, going about it once. And they came back to the camp. They spent the night at the camp. Verse 12 says, Then Joshua rose up early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord walked on, and they blew the trumpets continually. And the armed men were walking before them, and the rear guard was walking after the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets blew continually. And the second day they marched around the city once, and returned to camp, and so they did for 6 days. You know, I think we read that story a lot of times, and we think, oh, that's a neat, cute little Bible story. But put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Right? They're ready to fight, ready to take the promised land. They had wandered in the desert for 40 years, and now this is day 6. Day 6 of we wake up, we walk around the walls, and we come back to camp. I can't imagine the frustration, right? Ready for battle, ready to take our land, and now we're just walking around the walls. A lot of times in life we quit because our progress isn't always obvious. Right? Imagine, right? You're trying to lose weight. You're trying to diet. You're trying to get healthy. So what do? You diet, you start exercising, you work out, you drink more water, you make healthy food choices, and you get on the scale and the scale hasn't changed. Apparently you need to do it more than one day. But now it's a week, right? We've been eating good all week, haven't slipped once, and I get on the scale and it went up a pound. And you get frustrated and you're ready to quit. But now on the inverse of that, right? You stuck with it. Now you're on week 2. And I actually lost a couple pounds in week 2. And on week 3, hey, now I've lost 4 or 5 pounds and my clothes start to feel a little baggy. Right now, week 5, week 6, and people are complimenting me saying, hey, are you losing weight? You look good. When you see the progress, it's easy to stay focused. If it's your money, right, and you're trying to manage your money better, and we have a budget, and we're paying down debt, and the bills are paid off. And now all of a sudden, one of the credit cards is paid off, and I'm noticing there's a little more money in the bank account at the end of the month. When you see progress, it's easy to stay focused. The Israelites have now circled the city 6 times, 6 days, no sign of progress at all. There's not a crack in the wall, the foundations aren't shifting, the gates aren't getting any looser. Not only, though, did they not see any progress, but Joshua tells them, don't speak. Keep your mouth shut. Don't say a word until I tell you, and then when I tell you, shout. So why, right? Why the silence? I think the silence is very smart on Joshua, because I think Joshua knows something that we all know, but we never practice. Isn't it true that sometimes your mouth is your worst enemy? Especially in working towards long-term goals, right? When we got a goal, whatever the goal is, and we're working at it, and we're trying our best, sometimes our mouth is our worst enemy, because we'll say things like, I can't. I tried. I can't. Right? Or things are bad. And then not only are they bad, now things are getting worse. I'll never be able to. There's no way. And the more we speak it, the more we believe it. Sometimes our mouth is our worst enemy, and the truth is sometimes we need to tell ourselves to just shut up and keep marching. Shut up and keep marching, keep trusting, right? Keep praying, keep believing. I also find it interesting that Joshua never told the Israelites how long they'd be marching. Right? He never told them it's 7 days, it's a week, hang in there. Right? For all they know, they're on lap 6, day 6, and they got another month of this. They don't know. Joshua never told them. How frustrating is it sometimes when you're working and you're trying, but you just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel? How much easier is it when you know that the pain and the suffering and the hardships that you're facing are almost over? Right? It's easy to persevere when you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's easier for us to have grit, to have perseverance, when we know that it won't be long before the prize. But here God and Joshua are building their faith. Right? He's teaching them to have faith, to trust in God. You see, I think when we're tempted to throw in the towel, right? When we're tempted to walk away, when we're ready to just quit and give up and be done with it, I think we need to stop. We need to stop talking, stop convincing ourselves that we can't, to stop, right? To keep praying, to keep trusting God, to keep believing, to keep marching, to keep your feet moving forward, because the reality is we might be closer to the end than we think. Florence Chadwick was an American swimmer. In fact, she was the first swimmer, the first woman to swim the English Channel between France and England in both directions. In 1952, Florence Chadwick was attempting to swim between the California coastline and the Catalina Islands. It had never been done before. She was going to be the first to swim it in 1952. She started the swim, and it was going great. You know, she's got a few boats in the water with her, encouraging her, watching out for sharks, you know, making sure that if she was injured or something happened, they were there. But about 15 hours into the swim, a dense fog had set in. She began to lose her bearings. She was ready to quit, ready to give up. But in the boat, they encouraged her. They said, hey, keep going, keep swimming. So she kept swimming. It's about an hour after that, she lost her bearings. She couldn't see where she was. She was exhausted. She was discouraged. She was confused. And she quit. She said, I can't do it. They pulled her into the boat and began to head towards shore. And after they pulled her in and headed towards shore, she realized that she was less than a mile away from shore. We have to have grit, right? We have to keep going. You don't know how close you might be to completing your task. And I get it. I've been there, right? Sometimes it's hard for us to continue. It's hard to have perseverance. Sometimes it's just a whole lot easier to just quit and walk away from it. Hebrews 10:36, again, says, for you have need for endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. We all know the story of Jericho, right? Day 7, 7 laps, the trumpets sound, Israel shouts, and the walls fall. Right? Their grit, their endurance pays off. And I get that you're praying right now. Right? Some of us are fighting and we're ready. We believe. Right? We're trying, we're working towards that thing. We are giving it our best effort. And you know, in reality, you might be on lap 1. But maybe you're on lap 4 or 5 or 6. Maybe it's lap 7. My encouragement for you today is don't quit. Don't give up. Don't throw the towel in. Instead, use the towel to wipe the sweat off your face and keep going. Keep marching. Galatians 6:9, Paul writes that, he says, let us not grow weary from doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Keep working. Have grit. Again, James 1:12. And James writes, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trials, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. That alone should be enough motivation and encouragement to not quit. Right? Keep your eyes fixed on the prize. Remember why you started. Our ultimate goal, our ultimate prize, our ultimate reward is heaven. And if that's the case, then we need to have grit. We need to have endurance. We need to have perseverance and overcome our obstacles. And if we focus on the prize, we focus on God, focus on Jesus, then I think not giving up becomes incredibly easy. Focus on Jesus and have grit. Let's pray. Father God, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for this time, Lord, of fellowship, of worship, of study. And God, it's easy on a Sunday morning when everything feels good and everything's going well to say, have grit, have perseverance, have endurance. But God, when it's Wednesday and we're exhausted and the week's only half over and things are coming at us from every direction and we feel out of touch and out of tune with you and with this body, God, it gets incredibly difficult for us to stay focused and have endurance. It's easy for us to want to quit. But God, I pray today that you would be with us, that your Spirit would encourage us and that it would strengthen us to remain focused on the prize, to remain focused on our objective, to have grit, to have endurance, and to not give up. God, we pray to you for that strength this morning. Help us to overcome whatever the obstacle is, God. Whatever the concern is, whatever the hurdle, whatever the difficulty, God, give us the strength and the focus and the courage to face it and to overcome. God, again, I thank you for this time, for the people in this room. Lord, I pray that you would be with us as we leave this place. Be with those who aren't with us this morning. Bring us all back here again safely next week. God, again, I thank you and I praise you as always. In the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus, for salvation that we get through him. And it's in his name,